Hi, Sandy.
Amy, happy podcast day.
Happy
We're back.
podcast day to you. We're back. Yes. How's the weather there in beautiful Colorado?
Gorgeous. Just giving it one more week before I plant my annuals, just to make sure we're done with cold freezes. But yeah, all the landscaping, the cleanup's done. My bulbs are up. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm taking it all in. My legs are getting used to wearing shorts. How about you? How's Kansas City?
same. I have had the same situation of, oh my gosh, it is now hot and I am wearing shorts. And so it's like, okay, I need to like put some lotion on those legs and get them so they don't have their winter white sheen as usual. So anyway,
Transition time.
transition time, which is a really good segue into our topic today. This transition time, um, kind of. I'll say that. I'll let you introduce the topic because you brought it forward, and I love this question that you're going to share with us.
Okay. And for you, this probably comes very intuitively. And for me, it was a little bit of an aha on pushing things to the next step. So the topic of our title is What's Your Process? During COVID, one of the books our virtual group read together was Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights, sorry. And it was a wonderful book. And it ended up uh, being when we had the conversation, many people brought their husbands. My husband loved it. My son read it. And a lot of people thought it was about him and a celebrity, but he had all these great insights and ideas, and it was very motivational. And so fast forward, and it's 3 years, and somehow on my feed, I started seeing that there was going to be some type of a Matthew McConaughey virtual retreat with Tony Robbins and a whole bunch of people like Tony Robbins. And Matthew's comment was where this virtual event came from was being challenged by Tony Robbins saying, hey, this is a great book. You provide so many great insights. It's very motivational, it's inspirational, but people want to know what's the process. So how do I apply it? What's the process? You left them feeling good, but how do they apply it to their own lives? And in order to do that, you need to give them a process so that it's more than just inspiration and aha, this is so wonderful. What's the process? And I loved the simplicity of that, Amy, because I tend to be a person that, I'll give a speech, a workshop, strengths coaching as an example. And it's easy to leave inspired and motivated and leave people with that. But for both myself and for other people, how do you take that, make a plan, and even more importantly, have a process that you're implementing the motivation into your daily life? And I've been using that phrase quite a bit in different things, saying, hey, I want to do this, but without a process, am I actually achieving goals? So that's where the topic came from. And I thought, Amy, the process queen, is going to say, you mean you don't think what's the process right after, you read something, you're inspired, you set a goal, you don't come up with a process. But I don't think most people do intuitively, Amy, based on, I think he had 3 million people that signed up for this virtual conference. I'm like, okay, they want a process.
That is hysterical to me. And I'm sitting here trying to laugh quietly because as I do a lot of video or editing, I'm always laughing in the background with you. So I'm trying to like very quietly laugh and not interrupt you. Um, because so you're right. As you're telling this whole story, I'm like, I don't get this not having a process. Like if you have a goal, you have to know how you're going to get there, right? That so to me, this is kind of a funny question because my mind very intuitively just says, okay, what's the first step? Like
Mhm.
that's the first thing that I go to is what's the first step? I don't have to think through the whole process, but I'm at least when I have a goal or I have a thing, I'm like, all right, what's the first step that's going to get me going, moving that direction? Or like, what's the first step if I have any kind of project? What's the first step to get it started? So, anyway, you're right. I am very intuitively like, we need a process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but on the flip side of that, I don't grasp onto a lot of inspirational fluff. So that's where I lack, like that, like I can identify a process. And I'm noticing that because I'm developing my keynote
Mm-hmm.
and working on creating that. And I've got this great process, and I'm having more trouble with the inspiration and the fluff, where you're probably really good with the inspiration. And it's like, okay, what's the process?
And I think too, so with anything, we're talking about inspiration. I'll give an example. Strengths, okay, Gallup strengths. I'm a
Yeah.
certified coach. People, I would say typically this is how it works. People take their test, they get their top 5, and they're kind of blown away with, oh my gosh, this is so me. They laugh, they give examples. I'll coach them through how to use them, that they basically, even before how to use them, it's why they identify with them and kind of break it up. And they leave with, this is so me. Okay. But then 6 months later, other than saying, this is so me, not necessarily inspiration, but maybe identification, right? Have they done anything with those to implement anything in their life? Back to how to do the process. What do you do with them, right? Or how many people I know that sign up and say, I'm going to do a half marathon, and they don't have a plan. The plan is, I signed up, so now I committed, so that's my goal. But there's not, what's the process to get there? And sometimes it amazes me that sold out events like that, they'll say we're sold out, but then I'll read later that it was 1,700 people showed up. So are the 300 because they didn't have a process and they thought, if I sign up for it, I'm going to, that's enough motivation for me to do it. But before you know it, you're 2 weeks away from the event. I think weight loss is another one, committing and saying, I'm going to do it. I'm inspired. And people take it day by day, but there's no process in how they're going to get there.
Right. Right. It's very interesting. Just the whole concept of how everybody approaches things differently. And I'm thinking of StrengthsFinder, and I did exactly what you said. I got them. I loved them. They were so me. And I was very interested in sharing them with others as an identifier.
Right.
So just so you know who I am, this is who I am. But I didn't do anything beyond that with them. It was helpful to know what other people's strengths were, the people that I work with,
Mm-hmm.
to help, make those relationships work better. So I understood them better. But I never did anything else with my strengths finder.
And that's usually with strengths, Myers-Briggs, any of those testing. Usually, if there's one, I don't want to say complaint, there's usually 1 or 2 people that say, this is really nice, but what do I do with it? Not everybody else has taken it. So I can't say, oh, show me yours, so we know how to work together. What do I do with it? And there are practical things, right? And I'll tell you too, there's a reason that Atomic Habits is so popular, because really there's so much embedded in that, in maintaining processes, setting processes, and simplifying it. So it's not like you're doing this incredibly huge flow chart, but how to implement things, because there's so much that comes out of habits, right? And isn't the best process, well, I guess my mind, it's, if it's for yourself, to keep it pretty simple, attainable, right?
Right.
And then repeat, and have it become a habit, right? Have it become part of your daily life.
Right. That's the habits. Yes. Atomic habits. And that atomic habits, they set up all the processes for all to get to wherever you want to go or goal, what your goal is or where you want to go. And it's the process. That's very interesting and very insightful, Sandy. So when you were talking about the process, did you ever diagram sentences?
Yes,
I'm
it's,
sure you
I tell
did.
you, it's been school time. I mean,
Okay.
yes, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
not in my
Yeah.
adulthood.
Okay, well, I have helping children do it only because, but there is process mapping. And so when you were talking about what's the process, and that question was raised, that is where my head went to, was this whole process mapping. And it was this is an action, this is the next step, this is the next step. And oh, here's a decision you have to make at this step. Like, are you going to do this or this? And it maps, and here's the inputs. And it's kind of a fun thing to do if you are trying to streamline a process, which I like to streamline processes. But if you map something out, which I've done with some of my clients where we have many step processes, you map it out and then it's like, all right, how can I simplify this? What are all the steps and all the decision points, and where am I getting lost in this process because it's so long? Like, it's right here that I like shut down and I don't finish it. So if my goal is this, all those steps. Anyway, process mapping is kind of a easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just step by step identifying what the steps are, what the decisions are. And if you have inputs, like you're waiting on somebody for something at this point, then you identify that's the challenge. So you and I signed up for the workshop, the mic drop workshop.
You did. Okay. The full one. It's
Yes,
awesome.
the
And I
full
got to
one.
tell you too, it's okay. So keep going. Okay.
So I signed up for that, and this conversation made me think of this workshop. So you and I are both doing this mic drop workshop. You've already done it. You've
Mhm.
done the whole thing. I'm just like starting it. And it's to help us with our speaking and our keynote and, help build that.
The process.
Well, Jeff, it is a process. Exactly. That is exactly what I was thinking. When I was going through this, I was like, okay, she not only inspires you to be a better keynote speaker and, you know, have everything better, she gives you the process step by step.
Mm-hmm. And exactly that. And I'll use that as an example. I have done public speaking probably my whole professional career on different subjects. Some of them were more back in my CPA days, it was more non-paid for my professional associations. And it's so interesting, back to going through experience gives you one thing, but having somebody who's been through it and can weigh out the pros and cons of different things is a beautiful thing. Thus why you pay for a program like that, because there's wins and losses. I do like to do online workshops, and some things come free, some things have been really expensive, and it's all over the board on those that are good and those that aren't. And I've had one that I can think of that I'm not going to share that was really expensive. And this was on a different, whole different line, but it was very inspirational. And all of her advertisements up to it were, wow, I want to do it. I want what she's having. But I went through the course twice. I'm like, it just is very wishy-washy in how to actually launch it. There wasn't a good process. Now that we're talking, I'm thinking there was way too much inspiration and not enough roadmap, not enough process. And most people buying it wanted a process because they were already inspired. The inspiration gets you there, and then you got to put in the hard work, because process is usually not pretty either. It's the heavy lifting. It takes work. There's certain parts using this mic drop workshop. There's a few that I've done. I've probably watched 2 or 3 times because I'm a little hung up on it. I know I've got to do a few more steps to complete that step, and it's work.
Yeah. It's tactical and it's time and it's work. So I bring this up because Jess Ekstrom is the one presenting, and she's got this really great process to help us. But you and I are both going out and doing keynotes. So is your keynote more, are you sharing a process or are you inspiration? Because I'm trying to like, because I am sharing a process and I'm trying to like, okay, now I need to inspire.
So here's what I'm doing is the keynote is the inspiration because it's the why, and then I have workshops that are the how. So I don't get into the process in the keynote. People aren't going to walk away and say, oh, I didn't get the full thing. But if they're further inspired, I've got plenty of tools, whether it's workshop online, workshop in person, and a journal. But then I would tell you too, I have one that I take the workshop that I'll go and do the keynote, and with a workshop with it, that we have a working workshop within the time frame too. So, but it's difficult though, Amy, because you have to tell yourself in your mind, what am I trying to accomplish here? What do they want? Right. And I think
Right.
that's with anything, because inspiration is good. Not everyone wants a process. My example would be, even though I loved the Matthew McConaughey book, I watched some of the virtual. They did give you a process. It was a lot, but I don't need that process right now, because process takes time. And I've got 5 different processes in place for my writing, the keynote, all the things that go with it. And I don't have time. I think it's worthy, but it's not something I want right now. It's not a goal, what they're doing. So the inspiration was good for me on this, but I actually didn't want his full program with Tony Robbins in the process, maybe at some point in my life. So it's okay to do inspiration without process. But then if you do want to take it to the next step and set goals, you need more than a plan. A plan is saying I commit to it, right? A process is very specific in the steps in that plan. Am I saying that correctly? I even looked up the definition of 2 words, plan versus process.
Oh, well done. Well done. And the inspiration is what inspires the plan, but
Mm-hmm.
the process is the steps to get to that.
To get to that. And then I think I
Yeah.
did. And Amy, I don't know if I think I said this when we were offline. We were talking about Jess's mic drop because I was done at the very end, when I completed this online workshop. And I think there were 44 modules in it. So it does take some time, because listeners might think, oh, it's a keynote speech. Oh my gosh, there's things like the technical issues about the sound checks, what to wear, microphones being placed on your clothing, to contracting, invoicing. There's a lot that goes with it. But when I got to the end, she said, congratulations, you finished. Statistics show, not just with their workshops, online, when people sign up for a class, an online class, I think only like less than 5% complete it. I mean, it's a really low statistic of people that actually go all the way through. And now that we're talking about this, after me giving the example of Matthew McConaughey, it'd be interesting. Okay, of the 3 million people, how many sign up for the process, and then how many are going to actually complete it? Because it's the hard work. It's hard.
Right. Right. And it takes time because I've just started her stuff, and each of her modules, there's homework,
Mhm.
like, or most of them. Some of them there's not. Some of them there's like a little pause in it, but it usually has you go back and you have to do something because she's has this process and she wants you to build on it. So you have to keep doing these little things and then you end up with this big, beautiful thing. But um, it's not like just sitting there and listening for 10 minutes and then you listen to the next one. You got a whole bunch of work in between. So I can see where only 5% would finish it because I have gotten to because I've done some other, like a lot of pre work on my actual content and stuff. Um, but I've gotten to the slide part and I'm like, all right, I'm going to rework my slides. And so here we go. I got to pause this right here. I got to find my slides. I got to figure out, it's like just redeveloping it so it's better than what it was.
And you know what I think too? Most people would say they didn't quit, but there's a lot of quiet quitters, meaning people pause, they don't go back to it. So it would also be interesting how many people start something that say, well, I haven't quit, I'm going to finish that. I would think that's probably the largest percentage. They say, I'm going to go back to it, or, oh, that step looks hard, I got to do some. And I'm guilty of this, of all of a sudden I look at my notes, I'm thinking, how can it be a month since I looked at this? Because I thought, oh, that's a big block of work. Okay, I need a full day with no interruptions. How many people do put their process on hold for the perfect time and don't progress to the next step?
Sandy, that is one of the biggest obstacles when it comes to getting stuff done. That's one of the biggest reasons people procrastinate is they make things so big that they have to set aside a whole afternoon to do it. And then when that afternoon comes, they don't have a whole afternoon. They have other things they need to do also. So they procrastinate it until another time when they have a big block of time. I hate to say that. You're going to be like, Amy, that's so shameful. But I used to do that when we lived in Omaha. Our house was larger than it is now. And we had two hairy dogs. And I have this flexible schedule where I could schedule vacuuming in my week so that I would get it done. And so, I started doing, I would set it aside for a whole afternoon to vacuum. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It never took me a whole afternoon, but I would block off the whole afternoon and then sometimes I'd procrastinate and move it to a different day because it was such a big chunk of time. One time I actually timed the activity. Actually, what happened was I went out and took a long walk and I was sweaty and I hadn't vacuumed that afternoon and I needed to take a shower, but I wasn't ready to put on my pajamas. It was late at night or it was later. And so I was like, well, so if I vacuum from 7:30 to 8, then I can take a shower at 8 and then it's acceptable to be in my pajamas. Total mind game.
Right.
But anyway, but I vacuumed for half an hour and I got all of my vacuuming done. And I just started giggling at myself because I'm like, here I've been setting aside a whole afternoon to do this. I procrastinated it because it's such a pain to vacuum. It was less than a half an hour. And I do that with a lot of my things that are hard. If it's hard, it's like this big thing, and I've got to put a lot of time to it.
So the time thing, here's my example, and I'm doing my visual about moving something on the calendar. I had decided after we got back from Patagonia, about a month later, I renewed my pass for yoga, and I said, I'm committing to 2 yoga sessions a week. And so I'd look at back to a plan and a process, look at their schedule, put 2 on the calendar a week. And Amy, I kept, oh, that's not going to work because when am I going to walk the dog? I've got to get my long run in. I'm also training for a half marathon. And I like to do continual strength training. My dog needs walked. I do silver sneakers with my mom. It kept move. And finally I took a step back and I thought, okay, I actually did the math in, if I did the 2 yogas, and a long run's 12 miles, 3 runs a week, 2 silver sneakers with my mom, 5 of strength, plus I walk the dog, it's like I'd be working out 3 times a day. And so I said, I chose a process that made no sense at the end of the day, that I was stressing myself out trying to get it done. And so my decision was, you know what, once a week during the summertime when I'm running a lot, when I have a running plan, and then in the winter months, that's when I'll revisit and go to the 2 times. And you know what, I'm 1 time a week. It's a process that's doable because the thing I err on is over committing, like, oh, I'll choose a process. Let's bite on 5 different things at once. So I'm quite proud of myself for not doing the Matthew McConaughey, Tony Robbins, because I typically say yes. But now I do yoga once a week. I'm not moving it on my calendar. I'm choosing the one time, and it's doable. It's a attainable goal. And yeah, 2 times a week sounded great, but something else would have to give for that process to be attainable.
You know what? I love that you used the data and added it all up, because that's what I think that data, and I'm just a huge proponent of knowing the real data, because a lot of times what's in our head
Right.
is unattainable. It's unrealistic. It's unattainable. It's not like me, the vacuuming didn't take me all
Right.
afternoon. And once I had that 30 minutes, I was like, oh, I can fit that in right after lunch, and I still have my afternoon to schedule other stuff. It was just like, I don't have to set aside a whole afternoon for that.
It's got to be attainable, and it's got to be realistic.
Right. And data is helpful to know that timing it and figuring it out, adding it all up is important.
And I think at the end of the day, just asking the question when I want to go after the shiny nickel or something that looks very inspiring to me is, what's the process? And then back to look at my example of the exercise. Is it attainable? What would that look like, right? What's the data showing? For me, it's usually time, trying to find time for it. Does that work? Or do I have to give something else up? Because maybe it's worth giving something else up. Because process takes time. It's an action.
Yeah. Process
Even
is
if
an
it's
action.
thought, it's an action.
Right. So, what's an inspiration? Is there an inspiration out there for you that you are inspired by, but you've yet to identify a process for?
What would be a good one, honestly, and this is weight loss. And I laugh because I have like this little number that I'll put on. It keeps coming up, and it's like, oh my gosh, Sandy, you've talked about this forever that you want to be this weight, but all of
It
a
just
sudden
sits
2 months later it's just there. So that's an easy one, but I've
there.
never defined a process for doing that. And I mean, I've done it before, so I know what it takes. But isn't that funny that let's just keep writing the number down and wishful
Yeah.
thinking maybe it will happen. And then the funny thing is, because my exercise, I have a complete process for that, and I make sure I check the boxes. It's naturally coming off anyway, but I say weight loss.
Yeah. I would say weight loss is probably a good one. There's lots of stuff that I sit and I'm like, oh, that's so inspiring. And then I don't set up the process to do it. Um, I'm trying to think through some of my examples. Usually it's like, ooh, well, here's an example. You inspired me to that She is Durango was
Mhm.
very inspiring to me. And I remember when I was moving to Kansas City, I was like, oh, that would be fun to do in Kansas City. So you inspired me, but I never set up a process or anything to actually start it. So I think about stuff like that, that I have these, oh, this is cool. This is a fun inspiration, but I've never like actually done it.
What I do at things like that is I have like this little master sheet that I put these little ideas. I did a little library project in Boise that was so much fun, and I had a lot of people that followed it, where I went to the little libraries, and now I've got a GoPro that's been on my list. And I said, oh, once it's nice and it's spring, but I haven't done it yet. But part of it is time, and I thought I've got a few more things. Jess actually has another one for book writing, because she's a published author, and I've been through it once, but at the time I wasn't as serious about it, and now I am. I'm actually
Yeah.
pulling my book together. That comes first, because so I'm inspired to do the little library project. I need to put a process together, but when is it going to move off my list, right? My visual
Right.
list.
Right. And we can't do everything. That's what
Right.
I keep thinking. We can't do everything. I was pretty proud of myself just this week because I got a library card when we moved in. And this week I was like, all right, I am going to really start using the library. And I went in and I got the app and I'm like, oh, I'm going to start reserving these books that I want to read. And I'll have my summer reading all set up. I got an alert today that one of my books is ready. I was like, oh, hey, look at
Yay.
this. I'm like, I feel
Yay.
like I'm going to have a process. I'm going to go pick the book up. I'm going to enjoy it. But anyway, it's like sometimes, sometimes the priorities, the inspiration and priorities just don't rise to the level of doing it. And then, but when they do, and they are important, having the process behind them will help you get to wherever you want to be from the project, get it done. All right, so let's talk about the real and the ideal in this. I would say there's always the real is that there's always inspiration out there, but you mentioned there's got to be something to back up the inspiration to make it happen.
You gotta have steps. You gotta, what's your process? How are you gonna get there? And if it
Right.
takes a lot of time, maybe the end goal needs to change a little bit too, right? Yoga, right?
Yeah. Or remembering atomic habits and just, okay, what's the first step? And
Mhm.
let's build on that. Like, let's start there. And it can be a slow process. Moving forward is better than not moving at all.
Mhm. An
Right.
inert object does not move.
Right. And then the ideal is, what do you
Inspiration
think?
can come to life, it's to be inspired and want something, it's yours to have. Set up a process, and it doesn't have to be 55 steps. It doesn't, we're kind of overwhelming people with, oh, it took 44 steps to perfect our keynote. But, sometimes it's just signing up and showing up, right? Like yoga,
Right.
read the classes, pick one that's for beginners, show up. I mean, some of the processes for things that you're inspired or want to do are not, uh, do not include 50 steps to get to the end. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways
And
to get there. It's being realistic.
being realistic, and it doesn't have to look perfect. I think that's really the ideal of just go, just do. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least you're
To start.
moving toward wherever you want to be.
You can always keep
Where,
perfecting the process.
yes, yes. All right. Well, good conversation, Sandy. Thank you.
Keep asking myself the question, Amy. What
The
comes
process.
immediately to you, I'm going to keep asking the question. All right. Until next week.
Okay. Thanks, Sandy.
Bye.
Bye.